it fosters creativity. I really believe that. I really believe that like when you've got this structure and order to your life, like it really, again, like going back to like the point that we were making with Gary about not sleeping enough, like you get these moments of clarity, you get these moments of introspection and reflection when you're really like being intentional about using your time that you don't necessarily get if you're essentially just doing things for the sake of doing them or without purpose.
I would love to sort of explore more of the routines that maybe lead to the development of these habits or lead to the development or maybe support the structure, right? So I want to talk about this. Oh, and I didn't change the name of this guy, but it's a different individual. The secret of your future is hidden in your daily routine. What are your guys' thoughts about this?
I was just thinking, like, dang, then I'm screwed. No, no. Looking at my routines, it's so horrible without my day. I think that, it does glean into, what you think is important. I mean, I think behind everyone's behaviors is an intention, and with everyone's intentions gleans into their values and how they are as a person and what they're thinking. So, for sure, if you take it from that observational perspective, 100%, I think it's really important that when people are thinking of their habits and the routines, that all these things, they're motivated behaviors. No one does nothing for nothing. So even in yourself, if you are going through your own practices or your own life and thinking like, oh, I just do these things, or oh, I never noticed that I did this thing. I think for them, I think the first question is like, well, what purpose, function is this behavior, this habit, routine serving you, and why are you participating in it? Either good routines or bad routines, good habits or bad habits. I think it's really interesting to stop and pause and think, why do I do these things? What's the purpose? What's the function? What's the utility?
As you were talking, I wrote down the word intention. It's like, am I doing this because I want to do it? Because, I'm an
Yeah.
older guy. And so I've managed to like stay away from some of the newer apps that really seem to target just sucking people's time away from them. There's one that starts with a T and ends with a K that I think is pretty popular amongst kids these days. And the question is like, who's in control? Right at any given
Yeah.
point in time. Like, am I doing this because I want to do it? Is the thing that I think about quite a bit because all these topics, without the routines are a byproduct of the habits, and the habits are a byproduct of the structure. And the flow of this conversation is like we're building upon each of these different layers. And once you get to the point of routines, you've really got to take some time to try to just audit these habits. And then you've said this multiple times, Matt, the idea of goal setting and being real with yourself. Like, what I'm doing right now getting me closer to my goal, or is it not? And also, like, how realistic am I being about it? To close the loop on kind of like the Gary conversation, this is a really silly analogy, but hopefully it makes sense. Like, grinding all night might feel good in the moment and might feel like, oh man, I'm like making all this progress towards like becoming a better player. But like, I'm gonna liken it to brushing your teeth. Like, if you go to your dentist every 6 months and you just like the night before your dental exam, you just like, all right, I'm supposed to brush my teeth 2 minutes a
Let
day.
me
It's been
floss
3 days.
right
So I'm gonna
before.
floss for 6 hours. I'm gonna go nail this dental exam. No.
Crying, and then they're bleeding, and they're saying, "Oh, you need to floss more." They just poked my mouth with metal.
Yeah.
Anyway, go on.
Like you're a prime candidate for dental intervention. But I think it's the same thing. Like we can get the allure of like I just got so much better today. Like it feels like in the moment, like that emotion, that emotional piece. Like our brain starts to play tricks on us. And we're like, dude, I just won 12 ranked games in a row. Like I'm the best I've ever played. When in reality, like there's a whole bunch of luck that probably went into that. Like in terms of like the players that you got on your team, the players you were playing against, all these other things that were completely outside your control. So it's important to keep that perspective. And I think particularly with like the idea of routines. Routines just really help us dial in and do the things that we don't want to do, even when we know we should. Like, routines is just another great way of saying like having the discipline.
And I
I
really like that you started by talking about intention, right?
mhm.
Because maybe what we should always say is what are the intentional routines that you have? Because what? Sometimes we fall into routines that are completely unintentional, like what you're saying about TikTok. How many times has any of the viewers here used social media, Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, whatever, and 2 hours later you find yourself, where did the time go? Was this intentional for me to sit there and say, I'm going to learn this? And sometimes it's okay to intentionally unwind and say, I'm going to just use Twitter and just unwind for the next 30 minutes. Again, it's all about intention. What is your intention and what are the intentional routines that you have?
Feeling very attacked by both of you right now, but that's fine. Also, my dentist would agree. I grind too hard. Giggity. That is the joke right
Ha!
there. And they say I should probably stop grinding. I grind so hard, even in my sleep. I think the other thing too is what I was hearing is like the analogy of the lion and the gazelle, right? Both the lion and the gazelle, they wake up every morning knowing that they have to run. One is to run away because, or else I die. And the other one is to eat and to feed their family. And when you look at these habits and routines or the things that we're doing, we're always running, we're using them. But are you a lion or are you a gazelle? So looking at that deeper reason of, are you running because you're afraid of something, because of your own insecurities, your own life, you're trying to save yourself? Or are you running to eat? Are you running to feed your own family? Because when you think of it, gazelles don't run to provide for other people. They provide for themselves. I just need to run faster than you so I don't get eaten. But lions, if you watch them hunt, they hunt in packs. They run together so they can eat together. So what are you doing? Are you running because you're scared of something? Your insecurities because I'm bad. I want to get better because I don't want people to think I'm stupid or I'm junk at this game or they're gonna find me out that I'm not as good as that I've done in the past. Or are you a lion? Are you running because you want to? Are you running because you're trying to feed yourself? And this is the thing that you're chasing after your dreams. Because both are running. Both feel very different for very different reasons.
Coach J, I'm curious, from your perspective, working in this space as a coach for a while, what are some things that you've seen from players that have been really effective as habits that maybe even surprised you? And then we can move on to maybe some of the things that are not as effective. And we clearly have talked a lot about grinding your teeth when we hear that they've been grinding, right? So just too much grinding. And so what are some effective and ineffective routines that you've seen?
Yeah, I mean, this whole conversation has kind of been leading up to this point, right? Where it's like, all right, we've identified all of these different pieces of structure and habits that help to identify or help to shape routines in what I think are more long-term sustainable routines for professional esports players. So I think that like disciplining yourself was really, really important. I know there's like this negative connotation around the word discipline and you're just like this robotic person that does X, Y, and Z. But I'm telling you, like when you are really disciplined as an individual, it fosters creativity. I really believe that. I really believe that like when you've got this structure and order to your life, like again, like going back to like the point that we were making with Gary about not sleeping enough, like you get these moments of clarity, you get these moments of introspection and reflection when you're really like being intentional about using your time that you don't necessarily get if you're essentially just doing things for the sake of doing them or without purpose. So that adherence to a schedule, I think first and foremost, that would be the top thing. But I think also apart from that, like alone time. We live in a society and I'm a father, right? Like I have children and I see this with my kids. My daughter will come up to me all the time and say, "I'm bored." And I will say,
Oh, God, privilege.
"Good.
Oh.
Good. It's okay. Bored. It's okay that, the Netflix series is over or, whatever it is that's been like sucking you in has come to pass, right? Like, so being alone with yourself is like really important because getting to know yourself on a deeper level, I think is really, really impactful for a player because it helps you train your mental. It helps so much to be able to be resolute in the face of danger. To go, it's like the lion and gazelle. There are moments when, as a player, you're the lion and you're just feel it as a team, right? Like you are working the other team, and the other team is scared and they're not playing their game, and now you're just taking advantage more and more. And then there are times when you yourself are the gazelle as a player, and you feel that, and the energy is palpable. It's a shift in tone, and it's a shift in mindset. It's a shift in all the other systems start to sort of fail around that. So being able to recognize yourself, know kind of like how you're operating is really important for both you individually and then collectively in a team environment to be like, all right, boys, we need this tact pause right here, right now to go get back out and go remind ourselves of who we are. Study time, I think, is also really important. Like we talked about, like the best players are the best students. I truly believe that. We talked about pattern recognition earlier in this game, and so much. The more that you can automatize in your brain, again, the more creative freedom you're going to have, and the more that you're going to see the solution or understand when to get jiggy and break the rules and do something different that's going to throw your opponent off guard. How many times have we all been like wide swung, one tapped, and we just throw our hands up in the air like, what? This guy is so bad. And it's like, no, he's just conditioned you that he's not going to do that for the
Exactly.
last 3 rounds. And now he's just thrown you that curveball. That's another big piece. And then I think we've been talking a lot about all the things that go into the time itself that's being focused on the task. But you made a great point as well, too, Matt, which was like quitting time or just doing something that you want to do, like getting on Twitter or TikTok or whatever. Like Ryan, you're okay. We promise. We're not piling up on you. Like those things are
Guys,
important.
okay, I admit I have a problem. All right, I spend too much time on TikTok. I get it. I'll get off the Twitters. I understand. But anyway,
Like for me, right? Like I work in this office. I have a family outside this office, and what happens, like I'm Coach J in this office. You know what I mean? Like, but I'm
mhm.
Justin outside this office, and so like I have some shutdown routines. Like when I want to transition from being Coach J to like going out with my kids. Like my kids don't need Coach J; they need Justin. They need their dad. My wife
Mhm.
needs her husband. So that like routine, being able to like disconnect yourself from the avatar, the agent, whoever you are on social media and like going out and just being yourself, I think is also incredibly important from a routinization. And then I also sort of talked about, and I'll mention it again because I think it's impactful. And obviously kudos to you, Ryan, because you sort of helped me with this piece as well too. Is like what my end of the day routine looks like, which is just I like to focus on what did we as a team accomplish, find a win in the day. That feels good. It also is like really important to realize the gains. On the flip side, it's also important to recognize that there's more work to be done as a manager or a coach. That's like, if you could accept that one thing as a manager or a coach or a player, that like the job is never finished. It's literally never done. Like there is no perfect team. You win the
Mhm.
Super Bowl, you celebrate for a day, and then you're like back out doing the same thing again because
Mhm.
everybody is
Mhm.
hunting for you again. And so recognizing that there is work to be done, and then you've set your intention for the next day. Like this is what we're working on. Now I get to go back and be myself and do the things that like invigorate myself mentally, physically, spiritually, etc.
I think something that what I love about what you said too is that I want to highlight the separation between you as a
Exactly.
coach, you as
Same
a
here.
player, you as a father. I think it's important for everyone listening, players, coaches, whoever, to remember that they're more than their LP, more than their rank, more than their title, more than just a player. And I think what happens when it goes on the deep end is when players only bench their identity and how good they did today. Oh man, I went down like 3 ranks. I must be crap. I'm a shit person. Versus like, this is me as a player and playing these games is something else. And then when I log off, I am somebody,
Mhm.
something else. And
Mhm.
keeping that separation is such a healthy thing to do. So I really like how you highlighted that.
That
Thank
was
you.
the exact one thing I wanted to highlight as well, right? That separation is
Mm-hmm.
key for everyone's emotional and social well-being, right? To be
Mm-hmm.
able to separate that identity. And a lot of the times when pros and aspiring pros grind into the night, where is that separation? Why in this community are there so many gamers and individuals that have struggles with, you know, balance? It's because they only assume the single identity and hold so much of their own beliefs about themselves within that limited structure or limited framework. And so I really also want to underscore the importance of being able to separate yourself. You are much more than your performance. You are much more than how you might have behaved in a team environment. You know, there are so many potential stressors that occur and that might lead you to behave certain ways that you can separate yourself and you are a different person. And that makes it more easy for you to just be more emotionally healthy and allows yourself to recharge at the end of a day, right? When you have that time for yourself to sit there by yourself to realize that hey, I have my own interests as well. I can take the time to do me. And literally everything that you said, there's just so much truth to it. I think it's funny because a lot of what you say too, it reminds me of resources and things that I've listened to about Kobe Bryant, right? He's my hero. This ball right here, this lower, is signed by him. You know, he's
Okay.
literally my hero. And for anyone that wants to just learn a little more about really what I think is like a champion's mindset, just like listen to the latest or the last interview that he had with Jay Shetty, where he talks a lot about this stuff. It's just really powerful to be able to learn about how you can sit with your emotions, how you can approach routines, how you can approach your lifestyle, and just realize even the concept of the job's not done. That came from him. So I love that. I love that so much. And I really appreciate you bringing in all those concepts and ideas about routines. I mean, I don't have much else to ask. I feel like we went over everything. Did you have anything else that you wanted to ask about, Ryan?
Nah, I have some questions that people have asked that are a little off topic, but I wanted to make sure that we got to them. This is from Acro. How to combat inconsistent aim and how to adapt your playstyle to accommodate to the ability you play at that specific time.
What I'm gathering, and this is something that as a team or as individuals on our team, we identify is like our mechanics, just like any other part of our game, are not always consistent, right? One of my favorite old Counter-Strike teams was like the OG Virtus Pro team when they were called like Virtus Plow. Because when they started doing it right, when they executed right, like they were unstoppable. It didn't really matter so much mechanically how strong they were. They had like this 5 fingers, 1 hand mentality. I'm like picturing them on train right now and some of their executes. It's just next level. I think that like being able to lean into, there's strategy and there's tactics. And so I think that strategy is like the one piece, it's like the more overarching branch of team play in a game like this. And then you have tactics at a more of an individual level. And again, like we've talked about awareness quite a bit, but like awareness of like where you're at with your own mechanical skill is something that can help dictate kind of how you approach certain engagements. I mean, there's times when like I use to steal a phrase that we use within our team, like we're not always playing on our A game, right? Like being able to consistently perform our A game, it's great when it's happening, but it's also important to recognize when it's not, because that's going to change tactically kind of how you approach individual engagements. We're going to rely more on util. We're going to do some more of our team fights that we've got sort of put together versus like, hey, my opper is just absolutely on fire today. I just want him like getting on his lines, getting aggressive, opening these things up, because that's going to change also the strategic approach. So with those things in mind, I think that I love aim trainers in particular, because I think it's very low friction from a player's perspective. There's nothing except your mouse, like the mind-body connection between you and your arm and doing the exercises and the routines versus like jumping into a DM and now you're dealing with like another human on the other side and you're dealing with the emotion, you're dealing with like people typing in DM and then people adding you to like say how terrible you are. Like there's a million things that are sort of outside your control in a DM. And ultimately, like in a game of Valorant, which is obviously what I coach, there's only 24 rounds. And like if a player drops 30 kills in a game of Valorant, like we consider that to be like a really, really good game, right? You're going to get essentially the equivalent of like 30 engagements, the same that you would expect to have approximately in a game of Valorant, in about 60 seconds of an aim training routine. When you really want to hone in on your mechanics, you could really be effective with time management by doing that, even if it's only a couple of routines a day. I promise you it works. Go do it and tell me you're not fatigued after doing a couple sessions for about 5 minutes. And then if you disagree, like come back and tell me. But I think that like removing the friction from your mechanical training, particularly when it comes to aim, is something that certain players, they're not as willing to kind of do the drill as much. You see it. This is something that you see done like in most professional sports, the specific agility drills, game drills, etc. Like these are all things that are just sort of an accepted truth to improvement. Whereas I feel like in esports, because the structural pieces of esports haven't quite matured from top to bottom in terms of like your climb from being a high school Valorant player. So that is a piece that I'm pretty cognizant of training with, even with professional players, is like just that little bit of a mindset or reframe of how they approach the mechanical piece. So yeah,
There's no weekly speed training. There's no weekly aim training yet in esports until maybe it already is established in Basilisk or some of the other higher tier 1 esports orgs. But like that is something that eventually will, I think, get into the space and become more regular. It just depends on organizations being brave enough to buy into integrating that. But I think that was a great way to approach that question. I want to leave one more opportunity for individuals that are in the stages to join us again and sort of talk about anything, any question, any thought about habits, structures, routines.
I got one.
Okay, perfect.
See Nabi.
Nabi, come on through.
Come on down. We need like a Price is Right music.
True.
Good times.
True.
All right, Nabi, welcome to the show, my dude. What's your question for Coach J, my guy?
My question is, how do I discover what routines I need for success? How do I know what routines I need to build?
All of them.
This
Well,
is
more
a really good
specifically, like
question.
what do you mean? Like when you say like what routines in what area? Let's get more specific for you, my friend.
Sure, I consider myself to be an amateur FPS player. I've been doing it for about a year, but I'm really, really dedicated to improving. I have done other sports before, though. Like, I do martial arts a lot. And like you guys were saying, we have routines that we do. We drill and we condition our bodies, and then we spar. There's no, like, routine like that in esports that I've seen. Like it's just you queue into comp and you grind, and sometimes you do good, sometimes you do bad. I do aim training, but I need, like you guys were talking about, a routine. I want to know like what steps can I take to assure my improvement that way.
First of all, I love this question. The specificity, I'm afraid to try to be specific simply because like this goes back to like sort of understanding where gaps in a particular players are, which is really hard to determine without actually like watching them play and seeing is it like first engagements, like are you really good at getting opening kills, but then you overstay your welcome and you don't know like the different phases of the game and where you're struggling. Is it something that like you're actually like having a problem of getting the openers in a game, but you have a really good read and you're able to find like potential timing windows. So what I would encourage you to do as a player that's looking to improve and that has these sort of framework for routinization built in just based on previous experience is audit yourself daily. I think that one way to do it is go through a VOD and sort of non-judgmentally assess yourself. What did I do well? What needs work? And what are like my biggest weaknesses? Once you've identified those three things, what I would do is like maybe track, like give yourself a framework around improvement around those things where it's like, okay, I'm trying to think of a good example I could use. We went back, we were talking about like the idea of like stick and move with a sniper. Let's just use that as like a framework for improvement. Let's say you're a player that has a desire to become a professional sniper in Valorant. Look at your first engagements. Did you overstay your welcome? Did you have an opportunity to escape and did you not? And then it's like you're just auditing those things. Again, you're focused on the habit or the behavior and not on yourself at that point. You've sort of detached yourself from the judgment. And so now all you're doing is pick one game a night that you want to go back and watch. If you're not recording your own games, that'd be like step one. I highly encourage you to record your own games simply because it's a great source of feedback. And typically like there's a ton of people that want to work with people and you can almost always get somebody who's willing to like look at your game, even if they're not pro or even if they're just another amateur themselves, they're going to give you some perspective about yourself that you didn't already have. And then, like I said, like the biggest thing is like focus on one thing, going back to the whole idea of habits, like let's not start too big, like just find that one thing that you want to improve on and audit yourself on a daily basis, watch back one game and track it like over 30 days and say to yourself, like, did I get better at this thing? If you're not, then like you can adjust your behaviors to account for that. But if you just focus on like that one sort of knock-on thing that's going to have additional benefits to either you being live more in different phases of the game or improving yourself mechanically. There's no one size fits all approach here, but I think that if you could spend that time focusing on the singular piece that you notice that you feel like is the area of weakness, like the squeaky wheel getting the grease is just, it's going to improve your performance overall.
I just really want to echo that and also zoom out a bit because we can also really think of the idea of planning in different time periods, right? Let's say we are planning just for 30 days. I want to improve one skill. Or you can plan and really think about over the next year, what do you want to achieve? Depends on what you're willing to take the time to plan around. And it comes back down again to the idea of what is the framework for how you're going to improve? Meaning, what is your understanding of whatever game that you play? What are the necessary things within the skill tree that you need to work on? Game sense, mechanics. Within mechanics, I need to work on peeking. I need to work on rotating. I need to work on supporting with my utility. Maybe I already got that wrong, but mechanics as in aim and things like that, and game knowledge, everything else around how you have to rotate, how you can communicate with your team, things like that. Identifying a few basic things. Doesn't have to be as thorough as all of that. Again, if you're planning for a month, you might only need one thing. If you're planning, hey, I want in 2 years, I want to be able to get to the pro scene, you can get really specific. It just depends on you. Some people that are big planners can do that. Starting small, I think using that approach is for 1 month, identifying what the base, create a profile for yourself. What is my profile of how I approach things? And what is the one thing that I can choose that will yield the most return for me as a player at this skill level. And I think that's a good way for you to approach it just on your own. But you don't always have to do it alone. Like CoachJ said, you can always find other individuals. You can work with a coach. You can work with your teammates. You can work with someone that just provides a different perspective. And ultimately, we always touched on this idea throughout this entire thing. Are you a student of the game? Because as you understand the game more and more and more clearly, that whole skill tree idea becomes very clear to you. And you say, well, I know I'm weak at this part of the skill tree, or I'm weak at this part of my game, and this is how I'm going to prove it in the next month. But as an amateur, hey, I think just learning a bit more about those aspects of the game, choosing one at a time, is a good start.
I'd even go for it. Like my suggestions, focus on 3 routines: sleeping, eating, exercise, maybe one more training. Those are the 4 routines I suggest that you focus on. If you don't sleep, there's no way you're going to be able to think. If you're hungry, we're not ourselves when we're hungry. If you're not exercising, you feel bad generally, and then we can think of your training routine. So make sure you take care of yourself first, and then you can get more specific. But just want to echo everything everyone said here for sure.
So thanks again, Nabi, for hopping in here. If you don't mind heading back to the stage, and I want to start moving this towards a close. If you guys did learn something, please tweet out. Please, on social media, it always helps us. What did you learn? Tag myself, tag CoachJ, tag Ryan, and say this is what I learned, so that not only you are learning it, but maybe we can help the entire community in gaming be a little more intentional about their structure, habits, and routines as a gamer. But yeah, again, I really appreciate everyone tuning in. I know you guys will probably have a lot more questions. If you guys want, message us. We'll do our best to respond to you guys individually. I do want to leave some room for you, Coach Jay, just to say, like, do you have anything else you want this community to know, or anyone that's listening to know about health, performance, gaming, or just in general about life?
Esports is a very unforgiving industry. We're judged. A lot of times results are demanded yesterday, and it's a very public space for those that compete in it. So I think that there's one thing that I would like to sort of close with. We on our team, we do things a little differently. Like, the word love is thrown around a lot amongst players, myself. I personally believe that leading with love creates better outcomes than leading with fear. And I also want to say to anybody that's watching this, wherever you are on your path, patience is the ultimate virtue. It might feel like, even the last questioner came on and said that they were an amateur FPS player and they've been playing for a year. Like, there are tons of players that have been playing for much longer. They don't have the desire to improve in such a way, even just be like, you're listening to this podcast, you come on and had a great question, and like, you're very introspective, and like, these are all tremendous qualities. And what I'll say is, like, as long as you continue to ask the right questions, get in touch with yourself, and apply those things on an ongoing basis, like, your improvement arc is essentially guaranteed. It's just when it's going to really hit critical velocity is really up to you. And also, just thank you both enough for having me on this podcast, because certainly esports is my passion. Working with young adults in this space is my passion. And to be able to maybe get my message out to a larger audience has been really, really fulfilling for me personally. And so I'm just greatly both humbled and honored to be a part of this conversation.
Likewise, man. I mean, I think we learned so much today, just being able to speak about all these things so openly, but also just being real about, like, hey, we care about you guys. We're always sort of thinking about the individual and not just the actions that might benefit you in game.
Yeah.
And that's what I really love. That's what I really love about how we all think. And that's what I really am happy. I'm really happy that we brought you on as our guest. And again, thank you guys, everyone, for tuning in. For the questions that we didn't get to answer, I think what we'll do is next time in the beginning, we'll do our best to answer them.
I was thinking, this is all the questions we've got. This is for extra content for us to answer, or we can make small videos, or like you said, Matt, you can start off next time. So honestly, thank you guys so much for all your questions. Coach Jay, thanks for coming on. And I really appreciate everyone participating. When's the next time we're going to be doing this? We're hoping that this is going to be, how often, Matt, is this going to happen?
This is going to be every month, at the end of every month. And so we have another coach lined up, and we will probably be getting some pro players that we're working with, that we feel, again, we'll be able to provide some insight into how they approach their health, how they approach their performance, so that they could share their buffs with you guys. So the buff isn't just with them, it's with the entire community. That's why it's called the 1 HP buff. This was a coaching buff by Coach Jay. If you're a coach, I would definitely listen to this over and over and over again, because there were just so many nuggets of advice and frameworks of understanding that I think are very limited and rare in the esports space.
All right, friends. Well, consider yourself buffed. And remember, when things get tough, you can always come back to us here at 1 HP. Thank you guys so much for coming. Coach Jay, thank you for your knowledge. Thank you for your time and all your suggestions. Thank you so much, everyone, for your questions and your attention. And we'll see you guys later. Peace.